in the Soviet Union in 1982. At that point, in 1982, the KGB basically overthrew the other factions within the Soviet ruling coalition within the Communist Party. And so Andropov, Chermyrdin, and Gorbachev were all heirs to that legacy, and Putin is the inheritor of that legacy. Now you combine that concentration of power with the collapse of the educational system in the Soviet system around 1986, with the country's demographic collapse, and it means that the total elite throughout the entire Russian system is only about 130 people, and Putin has had 23 years to basically purge it down to the people that he feels he can trust. So if Putin were to slip in the shower and fall into some duct tape and sit in a chair and throw himself into a pool, we probably wouldn't have any serious policy changes because everybody who's left is more or less on the same page. Okay, so with an elite that is that concentrated and that small, the capacity to manage the entire system is limited. Now, this isn't quite as bad as it is in China. I mean, China's a one-man show now, and even if Xi Jinping were the smartest person on the planet, he still wouldn't be able to micromanage everything in the system, and that's why we're seeing the policy ossification and cracks forming throughout the entire Chinese system. That's not that bad in Russia. But Putin has had to reach out to manage this system by aligning with other factions. At one point, there was a bunch of technocrats like the former finance minister Kudrin, but more reliably, he's partnered with organized crime. This is one of the reasons why the Russians have proven to be so troubled in cyberspace until very recently. So you've got this concentration of power, which urges corruption, that is partnered with organized crime, which loves corruption. And as a result, the whole system is cracking apart. Putin himself, in part because he doesn't, I don't know how people live here. Putin himself, because of the concentration, has sharply limited who has access to him simply because there aren't a lot of people to choose from. So he has an inner circle of about 6 people, 3 of whom are absolutely incompetent, like the defense minister Shoigu, who's one of his old buddies back from East Berlin. Excuse me. In terms of the people that are competent, one of them is the chair of the KGB, FSB, whose name, Patrushev, wow, sorry, it's been a long month, who is providing him with information on internal security, but is of less use on the battlefield. And his chief propagandist is one of the 6 people who's in the inner circle. So imagine if one of your 6 sources of information that you used to manage everything in your life was either Rachel Maddow or Tucker Carlson. He's just not getting information that's great, and it doesn't help that he kind of insists that everybody lie to him about everything. So we get this brittle system that's very top-heavy, but not top-competent. And in that sort of environment, in dynamic situations like, I don't know, a war, you are flirting with state collapse. On the security front, now the Russians launched their assault in Ukraine not because they were mad, or because Putin has an ego, or wants to rebuild an empire. No. The Russian demographic is in collapse. The Russian ethnicity is going to cease to exist this century. It's just a question of how long the state can hold on. Ukraine is on the way to 2 of the big invasion access points into the Russian space. And with a demographic that's in collapse, Putin rightly feels that unless they can control those gateways, the next time there's a major war, the Russian system will dissolve. Because there won't be anyone to defend it, so you have to concentrate forces in the access points to make a block. That's what this is all about. This is what it's always been about. That strategic desperation is why this war is happening. But the only thing that would be worse from the Russian point of view of not launching it, and probably seeing the Russian system disintegrate between 2040 and 2070, would be to launch it and fail. Because that would leave Russia completely open to all those invasion avenues. At the same time, it has paid all the costs for the war. At the same time, it is now under a degree of sanction from pretty much everyone as long as this government is in power. So we are looking, if the Russians lose this war, at a complete disintegration of the system on the time frame of like 10 years. Remember, with the recent mobilization, we're pulling about 500,000 Russian men in their 20s out and throwing them into the meat grinder. They might be able to make a difference. You throw 500,000 men at anything, it's going to make a difference. But it's going to come at the cost of the depletion of the last generation that the Russians have to even generate kids in the first place. There are less than 8 million Russian men in their 20s, and we're now looking at about 10% of them being involved directly in the war. This isn't going to be the last mobilization either, because the Russians don't have the tech. All they have are bodies. And in half of the wars that Russia has been in, where they've won on numbers. But this time around, those numbers are all they have, and when they're gone, they're depleted and they're never coming back. There is no next generation. So Putin, like Xi, is likely to preside over the end of his country. All right, that's it for me. Next time, we're talking about the Saudis. Mohammed bin Salman. Woohoo! Take care. Hey everyone, Peter Zeihan here, coming to you from the Reflecting Pool in DC, which is up opposite the Jefferson Memorial, which is probably my favorite of the memorials, and Jefferson my favorite president. So I thought it would be a good drawback to talk about perhaps the world's most un-Jeffersonian leader and one of my least favorite people, Mohammed bin Salman, the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia. Now, Mohammed bin Salman is, what's the best way to put this? He's the quintessential millennial. He's entitled. He gets very disappointed and a little pouty when he doesn't get his way. But he also is very good at managing people. And that means that